Hello, everybody. Wanted to talk a little more about some of the topics in Re-Enlightening. Why did I go through the effort to produce this? Because I think that there's a big change coming. It's not just that the world that we know it is, not producing happiness materially. It's that things are actually collapsing quite a bit. We saw this a bit during the pandemic, but I do believe it's about to get a lot worse. Why? Well, I do believe very strongly that China is about to implode as we know it. Now, I realize that we have all these tariffs and things like that are impinging on China, but it wasn't in great shape to start with. It's a very top-down economy, and I went through quite a bit in Re-Enlightening to explain why top-down is a problem to start with. Basically, it's what we call the tiger model. It's a way of growing an economy from nothing and going through the industrial process as rapidly as possible. Something that took, good 150 years in Britain, took about 70 years in America. They were able to do in China in about 20, maybe 30. Now, that's just one generation. You had 1/3 of the population move from the countryside to the cities during that time. And the upheaval was enormous, and it was all done from the top down, just like it was in Japan or South Korea or Taiwan or you name the tiger economy. Well, it's successful in the short term to do this. Why? Because the way forward is known. There is a plan that you can follow. Discipline counts. Directing capital to places where it's going to have the most effect can work for you. But what happens when you get to the top? Or as Bill Belichick once said, it's easier to become number one than to remain number one. What happens? Well, we saw this in Japan. 30 years ago, they were on top of the world. And then it's been nothing but, not necessarily down, but just sort of getting by ever since then. And the demographic collapse is real. South Korea is going to follow this path much quicker, and China even quicker yet. But China is a special case. You see, South Korea was able to rise with hardly anybody noticing because it's so small. China is huge. China is a good 20% of the planet's population. Now, there are a lot of reasons to believe that it's at the breaking point. It's an export-driven economy. Everything depends on their ability to export. They simply didn't allow a consumer society to develop. There is no internal market, at least not in any sense of a regular developed nation. And the demographic collapse on top of that, which was made significantly worse by decades of one-child policy, more top-down direction, the crisis is coming rapidly. Re-Enlightening is about what we do after that. Now, even if it's not China, we know that supply chains broke like crazy during the pandemic, and they're going to continue being a problem. How are we going to cope? What I suggested is something like Bretton Woods is about to happen. Now, Bretton Woods was a special case. 1944, the planet was flattened. I've talked about this in the past. There has never been an attempt to restructure the planet's economy like that. Now, the Versailles Treaty included a lot of trade agreements. The Congress of Vienna was heavy on the trade agreements after Napoleon. Even back to the Treaty of Westphalia, this happened. But setting up an entire global economic system, that was new. And something like that is going to happen again. How is it going to happen? My point is that it's going to. It's going to have to. Just imagine what happens if China is taken offline like that. It came up out of nowhere. It can go back to nowhere. We know that what they have built is not sustainable. It depends entirely on exports and foreign investment. The foreign investment has dried up, and with tariffs and all the other considerations, it's potentially very bad. How are we going to cope with all of that? What I'm saying is that the future has to be more bottom-up by nature. It simply has to be. How do we make it that way? It starts with, being able to talk about it. Being able to discuss this in a rational way. Putting aside all of the preconceived isms, all of the ideas that you might have all of the solutions in search of problems, and thinking with a very clear head about what it is you really want. Okay, what we want is one thing. What are the possibilities? This is what I outline. Because I think it's going to come very quickly that we're going to need to know exactly what the options are. And it looks like a giant wedge of Swiss cheese. Okay, that's a weird teaser. But it's in here. All right, I'll see everybody.